Well, good morning. I'm here to give you an update along with Mitchell McAnally from Garver, who's the airport's engineer of record. This is just a brief overview of a lot of the projects and initiatives we have going on at McKinney National Airport. I'm Ken Carley. I'm the airport director. I've been there since 2018. Most of my career prior to that's been in the Midwest. And came down here in February 2018 to kind of take over and oversee the development of the airport, which has actually been incredibly fast-paced over the last 5 or 6 years. Even with COVID, honestly, a lot of the initiatives that we had in play leading into 1920 really didn't lose much momentum. So it's an exciting airport. There's a lot of construction projects. We'll touch on a lot of different things and kind of what's on the horizon for us in the future. And Mitchell, I think when he comes up, I'll have him come up here in a few minutes and he can give you a little more overview of his background and credentials. So we'll make sure that he is legitimately should be the airport's engineer of record. The airport has been around since the late 1970s. It started as a lot of general aviation airports, relatively modest, runway, not even a parallel taxiway to begin with, and a couple T hangars for a lot of single engine piston aircraft. And it's just kind of grown over the years and over the decades, really to respond to the demand for general aviation in the region. And really that's the same case today. What's different is it's really just the pace of that growth and demand has really accelerated over the last several years. So for us, the business model is one where the revenue streams from the sale of aeronautical services and the rents are really supporting the maintenance and upkeep of the airport. In 2013, the city did something that's maybe more commonplace today than it was historically, but they actually purchased the fixed base operator that provides aviation fuel sales and some other aeronautical services. They purchased that from the private sector and really took that over and internalized it with the goal of being strategic about that and really having that facilitate future growth and development. And now, 10, 11 years into that transition, I think, we can, at least from my perspective, it's been a successful change, if you will. Really, the intent was to grow services. When the city bought a lot of the infrastructure, they bought most of the hangars and vertical assets on the airport. And then the fueling enterprise, we had probably about 60% occupancy in our hangars and office space. Today we're at 100% and we have demand that we can't meet, and we're building new facilities to accommodate that demand. So that was in 2013. We manage today about 400,000 square feet of hangar and office space. And then we actually, airports that are that receive federal funding are held to a series of grant assurances. And under those grant assurances, an airport sponsor, the owner of the airport, can claim fueling or really any aeronautical service as a proprietary right, meaning we don't allow the private sector to come in and compete for those sales of those dollars. And that's kind of what we're doing today. We've claimed fuel sales of aviation fuel and the storage of aviation fuel as a proprietary right since we acquired the FBO in 2013. And we receive the revenues that we receive from that really supports the maintenance and operation of the airport. And the airport is totally self-sustaining today. It has been since 2020. We take no general fund support from the city. All the revenues that we generate from those sales of those aeronautical activities go back into the operation. We have about a $15 million annual budget today. And we've actually pulled probably about $16 million since 2013 out of cash reserves that we've accrued through the operation of the airport and put that money back into capital projects on the airport. So by a lot of these measures, it's a successful operation. We generate about $3.5 million of ad valorem tax revenue back to the city. That's primarily through the capital improvements that are on ground rents that the city owns. The city will own a piece of property. They'll lease it out, collect ground rent, and the private sector will come in and develop or build whatever aeronautical facility they want. And then that's taxed in the municipality, much the way a house or a business's offices would be taxed. And then the other source that makes up that $3.5 million is taxes on business aircraft that are based at the airport. And then looking at the economic activity that the airport generates, we're just finishing up a brand new study. We haven't even actually put it out. You'll see some press releases on that in the next month or so, but about $299 million in activity, economic activity back to the community in the region based on all of the operations, the capital projects, the on-airport jobs, and the multiplier effects of all that. So by all accounts, I think it's been a pretty successful operation to date. A lot of construction on the airport right now. Everything that you see kind of highlighted with the color is projects that are either under construction or have been funded and bid, and in one case getting ready to start. We have a pre-construction meeting on some of the taxiway projects later this week. We completed a 500-foot extension to the south, which is on the left side of your diagram there. You see the north arrow pointing to the right. We completed that in the fall of last year. We're getting ready to start construction on the north end, another 500-foot extension. We're doing a couple of different projects in the green there in the taxiway area. In the midfield, that one project, why that lighter green is wider, we're actually moving the taxiway to the east, pushing it out to create more ramp space or more apron space in the midfield area for parking aircraft. We completed an airfield maintenance building last year. We completed a new fixed base operation terminal building, a corporate terminal building for aircraft and passengers and crews coming and going. We have under construction right now another 40,000 square foot hangar that the FBO will manage, and a U.S. Customs facility to process international arrivals. We have a couple of anchor tenants that most of their flying is international, and we receive quite a bit of, well, it's modest today, international arrivals. We're probably getting, I don't know, about 60 a month right now, but that's been growing. And then we have some other projects there in that purple area in the middle of the diagram. 3 different projects on that 11-acre aeronautical parcel that we just really opened up. The first hangar is being constructed. It's the one in the middle there, the middle purple shade. That's a corporate hangar for Encore Wire. And then we're constructing a short taxiway connector. Right now the airport is to basically connect that hangar to the taxiway system and really open up that whole parcel for aeronautical use. In front of that, Texas Department of Public Safety is planning to build about a 15,000 square foot hangar that would house its fleet that's based at McKinney and its operations. And then we have a large 5-acre parcel at the back where we have an existing tenant on the airport today that has an international flight department. They're looking at getting into their next fleet of aircraft, a larger type of aircraft that won't fit in the hangar they're leasing today. So they're looking at a ground lease on 5 acres and construction of a new facility. And then the kind of the very bright pink color, I don't know what to call that color, fuchsia, what is it? That is a third-party development where we leased out about 3.5 acres to an aircraft manufacturer called Cirrus. I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute. But they're building about $15 million in facilities for a couple new hangars and some office space. So all in right now, about $140 million in development projects in the private and public sector combined for this airport. The Cirrus's MRO is a maintenance repair overhaul shop. I think there's three of these in the U.S. right now, 3 or 4. But it's a private development. Again, we leased them the ground. They're coming in with about a $14.5 million project on 3.5 acres. They're actually at the airport today. We leased them a whole hangar to kind of get their business up and running. They've been there for a few years now, and it's been very successful. But they're really just running out of space. So this facility will kind of allow them to kind of grow that operation uninhibited, and it also will bring a hangar back into our portfolio that we need to lease out to other tenants. So pretty good project. It's getting near the end. I think they're going to probably have a certificate of occupancy this fall, and they'll be moving their operation in there. And then this is maintaining a fleet of 2 aircraft that they manufacture. They manufacture the most successful single-engine piston aircraft in the country today. It's the Cirrus SR-22. And then they build a relatively newer airframe, a Vision Jet, which is a very light jet, or VLJ. It's a single-engine, 5-passenger airplane. In terms of new jets, they're relatively inexpensive. I think they're around $4 million. But it meets kind of a market segment that no one else is in. It's been highly successful. And when they were looking at locations, they came to McKinney. There was a lot of interest in being here because a lot of their fleet is owned within about a 500 nautical mile radius of the airport. So they saw it as a good location for owners to come and bring their aircraft for maintenance. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mitchell and let him talk more specifically about a couple of construction projects that are currently underway.
All right, thank you, Ken. I guess real quick, he gave me somewhat of an introduction of engineering background, so I'll clear that right now. For Garver, I'm Garver's Aviation Texas leader. For anything across the state of Texas with just an aviation focus. That's my background. May look young, but I've been doing it for 17 years now at this point. Loved every bit of it, and really just been focused on aviation itself. So here at McKinney, this project, Ken actually mentioned it was that middle purplish hangar that he was pointing out to. This is Encore Wire's new hangar with a partnership with the city on developing that taxi lane that you saw there. And what you're seeing here, the reason why this project's really interesting, every project, we all go through it where you have change orders, you have change requests that always come at the worst possible time. And you want to be able to plan for it in advance, especially when you're dealing with the private sector. It's a little bit more challenging because on the public sector, it's usually a process that can be strung out over time, and you can eventually come to resolution over several months. In this instance, the existing fleet for Encore Wire was a smaller Gulfstream 280, which, as you can tell, this is a fairly large hangar. And the reason why is at the time they were looking at expanding their fleet. Their business model was changing where it was more domestic United States based. And if you heard here recently, Encore Wire was actually purchased by a European company. And because of that forethought to look ahead of, hey, we don't want just a smaller hangar, we want a bigger facility to be able to support our clients. It's really a good thing they did that because this facility here is actually a 28-foot door height. It can handle all the large corporate aircraft in the country. And in fact, the company that purchased them, their globals that they have fit perfectly into the facility. So if they would have at the time developed this hangar for a smaller type facility, this project would have been viewed and point. You'd have to pretty much build another facility in itself. So I think we can all agree the private world versus public world, change requests, they go in a much different fashion. And this is a great example where these people had the forethought to think about long-term, hey, let's just don't look at our now operations, let's look 10, 15 years down the line. May seem ridiculous. Now they look like geniuses because they built this facility for something that's going to happen here in the next 9 months, not 15 years. But for this was strictly a private development project with Crossland as the contractor. Ken mentioned the 40,000 square foot hangar for the FBO. What's interesting about this project, and he mentioned Customs, is that's actually a P3, public-private partnership between the city and the private developer, Griffin Swinnerton. And what they did is the developer, they took this 40,000 square foot hangar plus, get some more reminders. So they took the 40,000 square foot hangar, they combined it with the Customs facility, and the revenue that the city generates from leasing out the hangar actually were able to support building a new Customs facility. Because what you'll see here soon is Customs facilities are not cheap. They are very expensive little facilities that on its own, it's a challenging project to overtake. But for this facility, it's the 220 foot, or the clear span for the doors is 220 feet in length. So probably not given a great frame of reference on size, but that's a fairly large opening. Of course, we consider the doors associated with it, and it's that 28-foot door height. It's a pretty extensive project. The hangar alone is about $12 million, and of course, the contractor with that project is Swinnerton. So I mentioned that customs facility. Yes, that is only a 3,500 square foot facility for $6 million. So if you look at that price per square foot, that's over $1,700 a square foot. And you're wondering, what is that getting me? What that is getting you is effectively, you have to treat this almost like a federal installation, where if the federal government, Customs and Border Protection, even the FBI, you have to have actual penal grade detention facilities inside of this building. So what that looks like is if the federal government has a passenger that needs to be detained, it has to still be in a facility that meets all of the requirements from FBI, DHS, everything. And what that is you have these block walls that have reinforcement, concrete inside of them. You'll see drywall throughout it. If you've ever done a federal installation, it's not just drywall on the exterior. There's a steel cage behind that drywall on all those facilities. So if someone tried to punch through a wall, they're going to punch a steel cage. So it's another facet of trying to make this a penal grade facility. What's interesting about McKinney is I think a lot of you'll probably have global entry. What they want to do is take that, not just at DFW, but give another facility for people to drive to be able to go do your appointment for global entry. So that was a little facet. They wanted all this additional equipment, like, hey, we want to be able to serve the public on the land side. So that way anybody in this room can just go in, do your DHS appointment, get your global entry. So you had to balance both sides of a penal grade facility versus making it appealing to the general public. Because I think no one in this room wants to go to a jail to go do their interview for Customs and Border Protection, but it's a very unique project in itself. And again, this was a part of that E3 development with Griffin Swinnerton, with contractor being Swinnerton. Ken mentioned this project earlier. This is a south end runway extension that was on the left side of the screen. This added that 500 feet. The existing runway was about 7,000 feet long, added another 500 where it is currently 7,500 feet in length. And then of course, we'll talk about the north end. From a construction standpoint, the reason why this project was challenging is it's hard to see this, but from the top of this pavement here on the end to the existing ground, that's about a 15-foot elevation difference. And everybody knows North Texas has some of the best soils you can deal with it being highly expansive. And the first day we went out there on the job, the contractor, Senecola, he had that large equipment and sank about 2 feet in the ground. It was even worse than we anticipated. So we had to over excavate 10 feet on top of that. So you're talking about 10-foot over excavation, build it back up with select fill in the pavement area, and then eventually build it all the way back up to that embankment that's needed on the end of the pavement. So as engineers in the room, we can all agree, like, wow, that's a heavy pretty major undertaking. General public's like, that's all you got? It's 500 feet of pavement, not realizing a lot of that $12 million cost was in earthwork and soil mitigation. And then the concrete itself was maybe a 1.5 month portion of the entire 10-month project. So south end looks very simple, 500 feet, ended up being a bigger challenge with the full grand scheme of things. And then we flipped to the north end. So this project actually opened bids last Thursday. It's in bid review. But what this is on the north end, if you're familiar with McKinney, on the north end of the airport is the east fork of the Trinity River. So anytime you're extending pavement into a floodplain, that's always going to have some unique challenge in itself. So let's take that highly expansive soil that we're used to, let's throw a floodplain into it and just have a good combination of things going on. So everything you see in the green here on the screen, this is how much embankment that's going to be needed on the project. It's about over 400,000 cubic yards of embankment itself. And then when you look at the blue areas, that's a floodplain, and then of course the red and orange is the floodway associated with this project. So there's a lot of different lines going on there. Sorry, if you're not familiar with aviation, that's probably a little overwhelming, but what that is, those are the different things we have to protect for the airport to be able to operate efficiently. So when this runway extension is completed here in it's going to take 2 years to do this project, and you're about to see why, it's 2 years, this runway will be 8,000 feet in length. So if you think about the Metroplex, of course, DFW has all the large runways. You look at Alliance actually has the next longest runway in the region, and of course, left field. McKinney will be up there as that fourth airport in the region, be able to support that traffic for this project. So you can see the extension. And here's the profile. So here's your engineering for the day. It's kind of misleading, but this is really a 20 to 25 foot embankment that's going up on that north end. Of course, we're having to navigate floodplains, wetlands, things of that nature. And right off the bat, we're talking about PIs in the soil that were in the 60s. So what happens when you put a lot of bearing pressure on existing soil, and you're talking about 25 feet of it, it's just going to settle. Well, how do we mitigate that? So one of the things they're looking at, you'll see in the screen, is the wick drain installation. We're actually getting the contractor to have other alternatives available, stone columns, wick drains, you name it. We're open to it, but we're trying to reduce that settlement period that would need to occur with all that weight of that soil on that really poor soil that we're having to deal with. So as that weight of that soil hits the existing, it's going to squeeze out all that water, and eventually it'll go into the collection system to get it off the airfield. These vertical lines you see on the screen, this is it's called a medium approach lighting system and rail. That's if you're an aircraft's landing, they have conditions where if they can see the runway environment, they can land. So it's that strobe light. If you ever drive by an airport and you see the strobes, that's effectively what that is. So of course we're in the floodplain, so we're having to do the structural elements to be able to support and not be a problem within the East Fork Trinity River. But just by adding 500 feet, the whole program in itself, that's a $30 million project just to be able to do that. And when you're talking about settlement periods that could be anywhere from 6 months to 15 months, that's a huge variability that we're hoping to mitigate by using some type of wick drains, stone columns. We're just going to see what the market is on with respect to what the contractor would propose to help reduce that time. So with that, I'm sure a lot of y'all are here for is to understand where is McKinney going. So I will gladly pass it over for Ken to share where the airport's heading.
Yeah, so McKinney's been in the news a little bit recently and over the last couple of years on various stages of this initiative that we have to kind of transition to a commercial service airport or an airport that would have scheduled air carriers operating. So today it's all general aviation and it's pretty much everything except that: corporate, private, recreational, a little bit of military use, law enforcement, medical, transport, all of that kind of stuff. But this initiative started several years ago, and really what started it was airlines reaching out to us, the airport, the city, unsolicited, asking about being able to operate out of there and what it would take. I've worked at a couple commercial service airports, and they're not cheap to run. I knew it would increase the airport's operating costs, but then there's also a lot of potential benefit to it, not only in terms of economic impacts, but other revenue streams for the airport too. So we started a fairly detailed analysis back in late 2019, 2020 to really just look at the viability of the market, talk to a lot of different airlines, have a market analysis done by a competent firm that looked at a lot of detail about the region, the demand, the location of other airports, the proximity of growth in North Texas, and all of those kind of things. Looking at what it would cost to build facilities, looking at what the debt on those facilities would be, and how the revenues from operations and other non-aeronautical revenues that passenger airports generate would pay for all of that. And did an economic impact study to understand, okay, what would we potentially get out of all that? And so at every course along the way, it's kind of made sense to keep going. And so we have, I mean, looking at a range of operations from very low to very high, the economic impacts on that potentially for the airport could add an additional $615 to $850 million a year in economic activity, not only to the city of McKinney, but really the region, because it would be a regional asset. But again, very expensive to develop and build. So we've gone through a couple different iterations of the project over that time. The first initiative the city had was to really look at a full-on facility that would allow the service to be established and to grow for 10 or more years into the future uninhibited. And all in, that was about a $300 million project. And in May of last year, the city put on the ballot an initiative to generate tax revenue for that. And it was for a $200 million bond referendum, and that initiative failed. In conversations with the city leadership and city council post bond failure, they have expressed pretty clearly that there's still an interest and an intent on developing that service. So it was kind of put back on, the airport to really figure out how we could do that. So what we really came up with was a smaller scale project, or kind of what we're calling a proof of concept project. I'm going to bounce around a little bit here. No, I'm not. I'm going to get myself in trouble if I do. I'll come back to that thought. Just a little bit more on demand in the region. So that table on the right is directly out of a federal document. It's the National Plan of Integrated Airport Systems, the NIPIAS. It's put out every couple of years, and they look at, a 5-year across the country, kind of an analysis of demand and where it's a kind of a planning tool that the FAA uses and other federal agencies to understand where they need to put resources. But as you can see from this, they identified DFW as capacity constrained by 2026. Operations growth is expected to result in increasing levels of significant congestion and reduced levels of efficiency. Similarly, Love Field is projected to be congested by 2026, and they have a finite number of gates that can be added to that airport. All this to say, and this is some of the discussion we've had with the FAA when we're trying to seek federal funding and grant funding for some of the initiatives that would enable commercial service, is that you've got a problem in the region. There's 2 airports. Your own documents are starting to show that there's issues with capacity and constraint going forward. What is the solution to that? Every airline we've talked to, be it a legacy carrier, a low-cost carrier, ultra-low-cost carriers, all of them have said that there will likely be a 3rd and probably a 4th airport in this region serving the market. And it's a huge market, right? It's the 4th largest metropolitan area in the country right now. If you look at some of these other highly densely populated areas on the east-west coast, several of those have, 1 or 2 major airports, but some of them have 3, 4, 5 secondary airports helping to serve that demand. So that's been a little bit more of the justification, if you will, for the project. If you look at the area where we are in relation to the other commercial service airports, close within the region, and have facilities that exist today in terms of the airfield infrastructure to accommodate commercial service and transition relatively easily. We have about 144,000 operations in 2022, but a lot of that is still general aviation, distant training. So there's still a lot of capacity with the airport and the 1 runway system that we have today. And this looks at a little bit of what's termed a catchment area, if you will. So again, it shows the 3 airports and the relation, the proximity of them to each other. The area in the blue is what we would define as our primary catchment area, and it's defined with a drive time to the airport that's at least 10 minutes shorter than going to one of the other 2 airports that are doing commercial service today. And then the smaller area is what we consider the secondary catchment area, and that's about equal drive times. But I think within each of those catchment areas today, I want to say there's 1.1 million passenger enplanements that came out of those zip codes that were going through DFW and Love. So if you figure, okay, there's a number of enplanements, we're in a growing area, and we could reasonably expect to capture a certain percentage of that. Those are the kind of things that go into the market analysis about the demand for the service and what it might yield. And then this is a kind of a sensitivity analysis that came out of the whole market study that we did. We looked at a range of operations being from very low to very high, somewhere from 4 to 20 average daily departures. And then, the top row there looks at the percentage of capture. So, that's what what I was kind of referring to back with that other diagram that showed the catchment areas. If you could reasonably expect that you're going to have somewhere between 20 and 30% of capturing those enplanements, then you could look at somewhere between 8 and 12 average daily departures, for example. And for us, you look at those enplanements, that kind of drives what we expect in terms of revenue per passenger, what we could expect to charge the airline in operating costs per passenger. And the numbers start to be viable and work within the ranges that we're looking at here. And then this is just a larger overview, kind of zooming out a little bit from the airport, and you can see this area down here on the east side of the airport is where we would propose to build those new facilities. Today, all the development on the airport's on the west side. So we have probably 240 acres of aeronautical use property to be developed over there. And the intent would be to start commercial service operations on the east side and then continue to develop that property to the north as much as we can as demand for that or even other general aviation grows. We're actually running out of land on the west side, so we need to be over on the east side with projects anyway. So kind of a dual use of a lot of that infrastructure that would enable aeronautical use. Then the other thing significant about this is 399 spur. So TxDOT's preferred right-of-way really goes around the south side of the airport and parallels the runway to the north, but it's also going to open up the east side of the airport. It'd be shorter drive time, so even further distort those catchment areas in the airport's favor, and just kind of priming the airport and the east side of McKinney, if you will, for future growth and development. It's one of the fastest growing counties in the country. I think it had several of the fastest growing cities in the country today are in Collin County. So some of this is just trying to be proactive and plan for that growth and introducing commercial service among other initiatives at the airport. And I'll have Mitchell come up and close us out maybe with this little discussion on this slide.
All right, so as Ken mentioned, with the Spur 399 project, that's what you're seeing, this kind of gray line that goes around the south end, which is the left side of the screen, comes parallel to the east side. So from the city standpoint, everything that's not shaded, kind of transparent, that's what the city of McKinney owns from a property standpoint. Because if you're wondering, like, what about the west side for more development on the airport? The city actually doesn't own any of that property over there. So from a development standpoint, Ken mentioned this, they're getting severely restricted on what's available down to the point of 11 acres. And aeronautical development standpoint, that could be gone here in the next couple of years. And at that point, then the airport is effectively just waiting for that next opportunity. Well, that next opportunity is what's being proposed is this Spur 399 is going to be part of that catalyst to ultimately develop on that east side. You also notice that there's plans for future roadways coming off that spur that'll actually serve that airport. Everyone, if you see the market, everyone's seeing that. You're starting to see land go for sale on that side of the airport. So developers are already seeing the potential of that, of what that could be, and especially for McKinney's sake. What you're seeing here on the screen, it's the trip, so sorry if I FaceTime here. But this was the original ultimate vision of what that commercial service would look like on that side of the airport. When the bond failed, we kind of had to scale that back and look at more of a proof of concept. So that original vision, it was initial 4-gate terminal. The master planning aspect of it could go to 16 gates. So if you think about it, Love Field has 20. That's a lot of operations that are occurring out of the airfield. So we mentioned environmental impacts. Air and noise quality are one of the two biggest hot topics now, especially with air quality. We all know we're in a non-attainment area. One of the most pollutant things you can do in anything in the Metroplex is an aircraft. One of those 737 aircraft will easily put the airport out of compliance when it comes to ozone. So air quality was a major component that was heavily looked at. And we actually looked at it from the worst case scenario. Ken showed 4 departures of aircraft all the way up to 20. Now the financial and the regional expectations was probably that 4 to 6 departures. But because so many airlines were interested, you just didn't know what that number would be. So from an environmental standpoint, we actually assumed 20 departures. We said, hey, what's the worst case impact from an air quality standpoint? And then noise. Over there on the left side of the screen is another river catch basin, but also on the other side of that is the town of Fairview. We want to be respectful for what they had. And of course, that would be an increase in operations from a jet standpoint. So the noise contours, we had to look all aspects of the worst case scenario. And when the results came back from the consultant that did those studies, air and noise both were in compliance from the federal standards from NEPA. The next step is, what about traffic, surface transportation impacts? FM 546, if you're familiar with that area, it has a level of service of A right now. It's just a 2-lane roadway. Introducing commercial service, you would think, oh, that's going to really overwhelm the roads and reduce that level of service. Well, it did, but it only dropped it to a B during peak flow, which is usually in the morning going westbound, and of course in the afternoon going eastbound. City of McKinney design standards are actually for level of service D. So from even the worst case model, the service transportation impacts would be minimal when it comes to the environmental standpoint. So the city took the approach of, let's do worst case scenario for all environmental review, even though we might initially be something smaller. But Ken can tell you, every week's a new week on this project. When it comes to the airlines, it seems like someone just gets wind of this and says, hey, we're interested. Of course, you got to validate how real this actually is, but that is some of the challenges of this project. With the proof of concept, what you're seeing here, it's a little more pronounced. That is actually a smaller facility just to be able to accommodate revenue service. And we wanted to position this from the master plan so we wouldn't prohibit the growth of an eventual bigger, larger terminal facility. So a lot of different factors ultimately deliver this. But yeah, this was the entire program for where McKinney's looking at for what could be 2026 starting commercial service. With that, that's actually last slide. So I think we have a couple minutes for questions.
Yeah, please, anyone, don't be shy. We're about to unmute anyone virtually. Does anyone have any questions? Please raise your hand. Yes, sir.
A few questions, just trying to understand. So this is no longer the plan, this is the vision because of the bond now, right?
Yeah, I'm going to repeat your question so people on the phone can hear. So your question was, is this no longer the plan, the vision? This still is the plan, the vision. It might be hard to see on the screen, but can you point out the smaller?
Yeah, the smaller project is sitting here. It's a little bit highlighted over this other part that's muted.
So the other 12 camps are in there.
Yeah, the original project was all this. It was really not going to be immediately 12 gates day one.
Yeah, day one would
Larger.
be 4 with the ability to add up to 12 to 16. But the thing is that lot, that what you're seeing on the screen, if this thing was wildly successful, the city now has the ability to build a bigger facility to accommodate, keep this another one active, and then repurpose those lots. Correct.
And a lot of the cost savings as well is, the original project I mentioned was about $300 million all in, and a lot of that was in the terminal building. This kind of phase one proof of concept terminal and project all in with all the taxiway, apron, parking, everything's about $65 million. And a lot of the savings is from the building itself, because the building's really looking at like a 30,000 square foot strong structure type of building initially.
Second question is, so McKinney's looking at this because of the analysis, the extensive use of Dallas and DFW. Is there any other regional airports in the area, like Fort Worth, South, or anywhere that are doing something similar?
I would imagine.
McKinney's doing?
Yeah, I would imagine they are. I don't know how long they are. I think if airlines look at each opportunity a little differently. So they look at the catchment area, which is focused around drive time. So whatever that analysis might be for a different airport, it's different. If they were interested in those airports, they're not going to tell us anyway. So our focus is this, but hey, this is where we are in the system. We're kind of blessed by the geography that we have today in terms of location and the growth. It's kind of coming directly north right at us. But yeah, I would say, most of them have said there's going to be a third airport. There's going to be a fourth airport someday. So yeah, again, some of these other ones could potentially do it. The other factor in that is the geometry of the airfield or the pavement strengths capable of supporting those types of aircraft. So that's always a consideration for an airport, is if they have existing infrastructure that can accommodated or what is all the capital costs of bringing. For us, it's really just focused on these facilities with all of the airfield and the taxiways and everything. We're stressed for, 737 backward aircraft.
When were the NEPA studies finished?
For the airport, they're
What
not.
about the sound, the air quality?
Yeah, so it's still in draft phase, waiting on TxDOT and FAA to release the draft for public review.
And who is your kid checking?
We haven't got that to that yet.
I mean, on the runway and stuff that we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, so we had a partnership with HVJ and Terracon.
Other questions? Going once, twice. Please, everyone, a big round of applause for our next speaker.